without further ado, what I'm going to try and cover are just to kind of get your head set around what are these different types of engagements. They are variable. They're generally kind of custom. We do have some more standard offerings that I'll talk about as we get towards the end of the presentation. But I want to go through the structure of what they really entail. What are the types of activities that you'll see in these engagements that you'll be getting value from? What types of deliverables are ultimately produced and are things that are left behind that you can take advantage of? And then let's talk about the value from these, right? Because we do this for a reason. They do provide a lot of value, and as the title of the slide indicates, these can be very quick wins, ways to get a lot of insight, a lot of direction, validation in a short period of time, and provide a lot of value in that way. And then finally I'll talk about some of the types that we've provided already and offerings that we have. So the structure of it, what are these things? So commonly, when we do these engagements, it can be advisory engagements where we come in and are providing guidance and information. They can be assessments where we're actually looking at your environment, looking at your operations, looking at your technology and processes, and providing feedback and recommendation around those. These are really pretty rapid, right? So compressed timelines, they can usually stretch between the 2 and the 6 week period. We've done them in a day. We've done quick advisories in our app house where we've had teams come in and spend 8 hours with us, and those are really more about listening to some problem statements and providing some very specific real-time feedback and direction. We prepare for that in advance, but those are executed within a day. So they're pretty short in general, provide a lot of quick reaction wins and guidance. They're focused on a specific topic area, right? So these, like I said, we'll have some general offerings that we talk about later, but these can be customized to just about anything that you're working with. And we look at from a people and a process and a technology standpoint, anywhere you're operating that within your SAP ecosystem or even some of the ancillary systems and capabilities around that, we can structure advisement and assessment offerings that can fit that topic area. These leverage industry, technical, or domain-specific knowledge, right? So we're coming in to look at that specific area with specific knowledge, right? So that might be a process-driven thing. It might be a very technology-focused component or platform. It might be around an operational area of your SAP platform, or it might be around a business section. Any one of those is certainly fair game. Sometimes it's a little bit of multiple of those. These are very collaborative activities, so it isn't just us coming in and providing our viewpoint. It's really interacting with the client, interacting with where you're at, understanding what your needs are and your goals, and then taking that industry or technical or domain perspective and applying it to that, and then that produces the analysis and the output that we'll end up giving you. And then it involves a combination of tactics. So we can inspect and observe. And that can either be manual or through very automated means. We provide analysis of digesting what we've observed and the information that we've received, providing evaluations that we can give you readouts. We can provide education around these technical domain areas so that we're doing knowledge transfer to your teams, your staff, your operation about what the topic area is. And then recommendations and guidance. All of those are typical outputs of these types of engagements. Any questions on this? So this is a pretty typical end-to-end approach. Not every time will a assessment or advisory engagement hit on each one of these activities. Actually, I'm on the wrong slide. This is our broader end-to-end approach of how we do our offerings from business discovery through design, build, deliver, and measure. The reason why I call this out, you'll see this this slide in other sessions because this represents a lot of our mindset offerings. What we're talking about today is going to be in that far left. This kind of falls under the business discovery piece. And so I just wanted to position you, orient where we're at within the mindset journey. These are kind of the far left strategic advisory types of activities fall under that business discovery. Now we get to the structure. So as I was saying, there's a pretty standard set of activities that you'll see that fall into these types of engagements. They will be delivered and structured differently within a one advisory type versus this assessment versus this advisory. So they'll look a little bit different, but they entail a lot of the same steps and motions. So the first thing you'll see is there's a gather insights phase of each of these engagements. This is where we're pulling together data from multiple different sources, right? Sometimes this is within a technical domain or a functional domain where we're doing a landscape of the industry, what's happening, what is SAP offering, what are hyperscalers offering, what is the industry that you're operating within doing to innovate, what are those kind of data points that we can pull in, because those are going to be things that go into our analysis. So that's external research. Then we'll be looking internally at your organization and talking to your stakeholders, your subject matter experts, the people who care about this domain. And again, it could be a technology set, it could be a functional or operational set, it could be around people or process. And we identify who are those stakeholders, and we do interviews, and we gather input from them. Like what's important to them. This is that human-centered side of all that we do, so that we understand and we empathize with the goals, the needs, the wants, the desires, and the pain points of the people in your organization, and that's input. We can sometimes come on site and do observation, work study, like shadow somebody and see how they're doing their work. Inquire about why they're making this decision, or why did you pull up this tool. That's oftentimes another piece of input that we can get that's very hands-on. And sometimes observations are things that you might take for granted as a client, but we see something interesting there and can inquire about it, and that could be input to our analysis. And then reading organizational documentation. You've oftentimes pulled together insights already and directions and problem statements, and certainly we consume that. So there's this whole phase of gathering input, gathering information, and then with that, then we do some analysis. So we could look at your current operation and assess what is the state of that operation versus industry practice versus maturity models that we have that we can compare and give you feedback. We can do target state analysis, and this is where, again, talking to the subject matter experts and the stakeholders in your organization, knowing where you're at and putting together a view of what that target state is, so that we can start to build models and roadmaps that can help you get to that target state. Okay? These are very valuable outcomes. And one of the things that I would point out is not only is it sometimes that we bring the subject matter expertise, but I know that your organizations oftentimes have these subject matter experts, but two problems plague them. One is they don't have time to do the strategic analysis because the ongoing day-to-day requirements and obligations of their role and the tyranny of the urgent that always comes into play makes it impossible to get to that. And so these engagements are a good way to force the function of doing this planning and assessment and advisory. And then the other is sometimes you're just too close to it, and you need a different perspective to give you insights that you overlook because you've fallen into the routines and the understandings of just how things happen today. So we can look at target state. We can think through the strategic goals, right? Again, so we've obtained these insights from you, but then we can distill those and put together good understandings of analysis of what those goals are and how they pertain to this domain area. KPIs, dependencies, outlining the things that we've seen, that you've talked about, and that the industry would suggest that would provide insight into sequencing of how we need to do work and what types of dependencies might need to be considered and put into place before we can reach our strategic goals. And then prioritization. Again, a lot of that should come from the client. We'll provide perspectives from industry positions of these things usually arrive first, and you might be overlooking this step. But ultimately, we're trying to meet you with your goals and making sure that we're delivering the valued insights that are going to meet you in sequence of where your business goals align. So we do this analysis, and then from that we produce and validate recommendations. So we've observed a bunch of insights, we've done some analysis on it, and then we'll recommend a sequence of activities or some future state visions and architectures and various insights. And then we sit with you, and that's a collaborative conversation. We validate, does that make sense for you? Are you understanding this perspective and agreeing with that is, or are we missing something, right? So this isn't a closed loop. We go away and toss over a report. We want to make sure that we're understanding the situation correctly and conveying that information in a way that you understand it and can also feed back to us where you see that it might need refinement. So again, this might be people, process, and technology. What are your resourcing strategies? How do you need to bring new people into the organization? How might you need to train people differently to take on new roles and responsibilities for a new domain area? What are your technology strategies? You know, where do you sit with your SAP platform? Where do you sit with your cloud platform? Where do you sit with the processes around those? How are you obtaining efficiencies? And again, this will all be very dependent on what is the focus area of that engagement. Right? We never come in and just say, well, we're just going to look at everything, because that would take a really long time. These are quick wins, and so we're going to look at specific areas. All of these recommendations and the insights are going to be relevant to that domain area that we're doing the assessment. And then dependency alignments. And then, of course, we deliver artifacts that come at the tail end of this, and these are deliverables that you get to keep and manage and hopefully keep alive and become living artifacts that help drive business strategy for you. So these might be, again, they might be current state architectures, target state architectures, roadmaps that advise steps of investment and activity that you should take to achieve your goals, inventories of process and technologies that you might have that can be a deliverable that adds value, personas, like when we think about users and their needs and desires and what they need to be effective. That's another deliverable that oftentimes can be left. Architecture diagrams, reference implementations. Again, it will depend on the domain area and what it is that you're trying to achieve, but there will be deliverables that then you can use to drive your value. So that's the typical structure of these engagements. Any questions or feedback on this? Yes, Peter. Well, I would say it would typically, if we're going to fall short, a lot of times it would be within the recommendation area. Does it not go far enough? Does it not get them the direction, the specific direction that they need to advance the ball? And is it not actionable enough? That would be where that lives. I think where you can mitigate that risk and hit the target is being really thoughtful and clear upfront in your conversations when you're scoping the engagement. What are the expected deliverables? What are you going to try and drive with what you're going to get out of this, so that we can pay good attention to what we want to convey there, and then being really clear and thoughtful when you're doing the interviews to make sure that the subject matter experts and in particular stakeholders are aligned with that. Like, here's what we're trying to drive. Here's our understanding of what we're analyzing. Do you agree with that? You know, direction. What are your inputs relevant to that? Those are the ways that you could mitigate, you know, missing the mark on that. But I'd say that's probably the closest. Again, these are pretty short durations, and so there isn't a lot of runway to get too far off track, as long as you define pretty well up front what the goals are, and then, you know, bring the relevant knowledge and skill to the engagement. So I talked already about some of the activities that are involved in that kind of that 1 through 4 step, but we can go into just a little bit more detail. Again, there's oftentimes interviews, right? So we want to get the perspectives from the client's point of view. We bring subject matter expertise in and industry expertise, and we have a perspective, but what's more important is for us to really understand where the client's at and what are their perspectives and how do they differ from what ours are. This insight is critical to the analysis that we bring in later. One is just even understanding their viewpoint, but the specific data points that they will tell us about and the understanding of how things are working today and how things need to work associated with their business strategy, that's insight we don't have. Like we can't have it externally. So that's critically important. That empathy helps us to really kind of get to how they are thinking and are feeling. And those are things that we can provide some analysis around. People might not even be aware necessarily of how this impacts them and how it impacts their jobs and their teams until we start to inquire about that. And then that has a heavy opportunity to influence our future direction. Gaining clarity on the desired outcomes by aligning with goals and accountability. So again, we don't know what each person's accountabilities are and what their goals are until we have that insight with them. Knowing where they're trying to go, what's important to them, and how they're being measured is really important for us to be able to provide relevant insight that's going to help them meet those goals and their accountabilities. And without asking that question, those are things that we just don't know. Again, from afar, we have an industry perspective, a technology perspective, but getting next to the client and understanding that is super important. So that comes out in the interviews. And then again, this is where each individual assessment that we do, each advisory is tailored to that client because so much of the input becomes from their operation, their organization, and how they work. So that's really important as well. So there's these interviews, okay? So a lot of times there's education, not every time, but this is oftentimes a big part of it. When we do BTP advisory engagements, which has been a very popular topic lately, this is often a part of it. Like we'll come in and not only help you figure out where your organization should go with BTP, for example, but we can also educate you on what are all these different components in here, what are these capabilities, what would they do for you, how would you compare them to opportunities that you might have in your current tech stack or in a hyperscaler. It's just an example. But the education is sometimes an important outcome of this because you're trying to skill up your organization, your staff, your operation to take advantage of these. And so this is oftentimes packaged as one of the activities that we do that adds value. Typically, these are interactive workshops that we'll do. We record these workshops. That's something for you to have as training and reference material as you go forward. We oftentimes have a base set of information, but we'll curate that based on your particular needs and desires for what we've observed and talked about in scope. Sometimes there's interactive exercises involved. There's demos involved that help provide that education. And of course, there's always question and answer sessions, so we make sure that we're providing the information that's meeting the needs of the people and what they want to know. Any questions on these? So another activity you'll oftentimes find in these engagements are facilitated workshops. And we've talked about our app house, and we've had many of you as clients into our app house to engage in these workshops. But in here, we'll do a lot of the same steps and motions as we do in design thinking in terms of framing and scoping problem areas, making sure that we're identifying the scope of what problems we're trying to solve with this assessment or this advisory, and doing brainstorming exercises. In brainstorming, we'll get individual inputs from everybody in the room. We'll get small group inputs that we'll then share with one another. We'll get large group inputs where we build on one another's thoughts and get a lot of interactive brainstorming activity. Well, and then what the brainstorming opens up, large populations of ideas and thoughts and possible solutions, and then we'll do prioritization exercises to narrow those down to what's most relevant for you, voting exercises, and making sure that we're getting sequencing things from a complexity, an effort, and a value standpoint, right? Those types of categorizations then provide scope and prioritization that feed into all of the deliverables that you're going to get around roadmaps and our guidance and our advisory. So a lot of times these facilitated workshops are a key component. And the last, but maybe the more subtle but super important piece is it's a good way to gain alignment and buy-in. And so if you're a technology function in your organization and you want to get your business aligned with a direction for a platform strategy or an operational strategy, having their engagement in these facilitated workshops is a good way to get that alignment and buy-in because you're all participating together. The outcomes come out of the same place. You're all observing the process and have your inputs weighed into it. And so they're really valuable from that perspective. So these are just some of the typical types of activities that fall into these engagements. Any questions on these? Yeah, Pam? The question was, is there any prep work for the workshops? And specifically, I think you're talking about for the client, right? Yeah. Typically, we'll ask for documentation and things that they've already materialized. Sometimes, in order to gain the advantage of time within a time-boxed window, right? We don't have you up for a long period of time. We might send out a questionnaire or ask for some input and inventory in advance that people can send us their thoughts on a particular domain or topic area. We'll then synthesize, group, and kind of organize that information so it's ready when people show up, and you don't have to spend the time of that particular piece of the brainstorming, right? So that's the type of preparation. Usually doesn't entail a lot of effort on their side. I can't think of a time where we've asked clients to spend more than a couple hours preparing for this type of facilitation, right? We do a lot of the preparation to make sure that we're organized around it, but not the client. Yes, Peter? The question was, how do you make sure that the business is bought into the advisory before you start it? Yeah, that's a great question. I think, as I'm thinking on my feet, a lot of that would involve conversation about scope and participation, who's going to be involved, who are the stakeholders that we'll be interviewing and assessing, and understanding kind of the domain area around there. If it's absent of business participation and stakeholder alignment or assignment, then that's a good place to ask those questions about, like, well, how are you driving this? What are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? Maybe there are technical outcomes in the business isn't needed necessarily, but it certainly, if there are outcomes that are business direction related and they don't include those stakeholders, that would be a sign that we need to inquire a bit more about that. Yeah. I haven't encountered that so much in the engagements that I've had, so it hasn't been a requirement, but I think that's a good question and a great insight. Anything else? Let's see. So I think, I'm on deliverables. So some of the deliverables that you'll get out of this is a pretty common one. People want to have timelines. They want to have roadmaps. We might identify, proposed project timelines and resource plans that would go with a particular topic that you're trying to address. This one that I'm demonstrating here, this was for a EWM advisory. And so this client wanted to know if an EWM implementation was feasible within a particular time frame, given the environment that they had. And so they had a warehouse management system, but they did not have EWM. They had a very tight timeline to retire some environment constraints. And so, our advisory assessment was pulling in all their details of their operation, and then we produce a high-level resource plan and project timeline that said, here's what would, in our estimation, what it's going to take for you to deliver this, how much that would cost, what types of resources would be engaged, et cetera. So this was done in a 2-week time frame. That became input then into their work to go solicit our request for a proposal for building out that installation, right? So they use this tight 2-window advisory engagement to inform what's going to be a next strategic step for their organization. So one sample deliverable. Roadmaps is another one. So these are actual deliverables from a DevOps advisory that I worked on about 1.5 years ago. And here, this was a 4-week engagement, and there was a number of interviews, analysis that we did, and from that we developed a series of steps and action items. And it's certainly an eye chart, but in here we talk about people, process, and technology considerations across these different categories. So this is CI/CD, this is automated testing, there's infrastructure and environment, this is other considerations, monitoring and alerting. These are all just different categories of a DevOps environment that we were advising about. And then what are the people, process, and technology considerations? And those are then elaborated with specific action items for how they can achieve greater maturity in those areas. And then a roadmap that helps them phase out activities and work that could get them to a desired state in the future. So again, common type of deliverable that you'll be left with at the end of the advisory. This can guide internal investment. It can guide your internal project work and roadmap work, how you build teams, and how you engage Mindset or your other partners as well to help bring these to life. So again, I think it's really important that you look holistically. We will very often look at all of these categories when we do an assessment or an advisory for you. In the people domain, we're looking at roles and skills, their alignment within teams. How are you structuring those teams? What is your current hiring plan? What are the training things that you need to start to plan for organizationally? In technology, what are the platforms that you have available? Where are you going with those? What are the applications that you currently use and need to start to use? How do these integrate? How are you leveraging cloud? What is your security posture? All of those are the types of things that you would look at in a technology set. And then from a process standpoint, where are you leveraging automation? What types of digital transformation activities are you thinking about to take very manual or paper-based processes and make those available on tablets and phones and desktop interfaces? What types of governance are you putting around your environments? And these like from a cloud perspective, right? That's hyper important, but oftentimes, maybe not seen as something that they're looking at up front. Measurement, operations, delivery capabilities, all examples of process areas. So your advisory or assessment engagement might take on one or more of these different categories, but these are all good representations of things that are usually evaluated and looked at. And again, just a couple of the deliverables: current state assessments, business and technology strategy alignments, prioritize roadmaps, future and target state visualizations. These are common deliverables that come at the end of these engagements. Again, you get these pretty quickly, right? We're talking 2 to 6 weeks, and these offer a lot of value, especially from a planning and prioritization exercise for your technology and business organizations. Any questions on some of these deliverables? Is there anything missing? Anything that like you've seen in other engagements or advisories that you were wondering about? And again, this isn't exhaustive. These are meant to be examples. The question is, what is a BTP artifact? So when we've done these BTP engagements that I've been near, what I've seen is there's almost always an architectural viewpoint. How does BTP sit with their landscape, their SAP environment, their deployment topologies? Where does the integration flow to other systems? BTP is oftentimes, a center point for that. And there will also be, BTP is, as I mentioned earlier, that's another domain area where there's oftentimes an education component. And so one of the deliverables will be training. And so training of, what are the platform capabilities, how do they work? And then another deliverable that's oftentimes included with some of our standard BTP offerings will be a POC. And so that leaves a reference implementation that was done as a proof of concept that has a working BTP module or capability to demonstrate some small sliver of business capability. But then that's something that they own and keep, and then they can build real implementations based off of that reference. They can elaborate it and move on to next stages of it, for example. So those are common deliverables that I've seen for BTP. Anything else? Any other mindsetters have something else you've seen? Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah. Can you give an example where, obviously, at all these different organizations, there's a lot of different players in the mix, and give an example of maybe best practices where Mindset has gone in and worked with a large SI or other partners in developing out an organization's overall SAP roadmap. Like, what would be the best case scenario in a mix like that?
So the EWM implementation that I described, or the EWM advisory engagement, is a good example of that. So that's a large $35 billion international company. They have SIs that they've been working with for years for various deployments, and that manage their SAP build work as well as AMS work, supporting their environments. They saw specific value in us providing this type of strategic advisory in kind of external to their partners, right? Even though their partners are certainly aware of their situations, but our analysis, our advisory comes from industry perspective and practice expertise as well. We also bring a kind of that human-centric viewpoint, right? So it involved interviews and users, and that's not that any other organization can't and wouldn't do that, but it's just part and parcel with how we deliver it. And this client was very comfortable with how we approach that and saw great value in that. And so we have follow-up advisory engagements. We've done other advisory engagements with them around BTP as well. So that's a good example, though, I think, where you might have SIs that are doing integrations and implementations for you. We still can provide great value and insight, and it doesn't. None of these insights require the use of Mindset services for delivery on the backside of it. We oftentimes we're very well positioned to deliver those services and can provide great value there as well. But they're neat and tidy, and they own the deliverables that come out of it, regardless of who's doing the management. Does that help? Okay. Annabelle?
Is there ever a backlog as part of the advisory engagement that you've done? I've been involved with the design engagements where the high-level backlog is provided. Does that fall under the roadmap?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question is there a backlog provided? I think if you look at this as an example, this is representative of a backlog. There's activities and actions on here. They're not structured in a backlog such as user, I need this so that I can this, right? Very oftentimes that the structure of a user story that we take into our delivery backlogs don't really align with that. However, this is for all intents and purposes a backlog, right? And so these are each independent bullet pointed items, and there's a different visual representation of your backlog there, but that's kind of how it comes out. So it's not called the same thing, and it doesn't take exactly the same structure, but it serves that purpose. That's your kind of the guideline of work to do. Good question. Okay, so I got about 5 more minutes. I want to quickly just touch on value. So like I said, there's a competence that comes in that might be missing from your organization for this domain area or this technology, right? And so we can bring that. We don't know BTP. SAP sold it to us. What do I do with this? We have competence that we can come in and provide that value, and so that's one of the things that you get that's valuable. Fresh perspectives. I talked about being too close to the problem. Having somebody come in that can look at it from a different angle oftentimes adds great value. Lessons learned from other situations and organizations. We're a consulting company. We work with lots of different organizations. Sometimes they're doing things very similar to you, but they're doing them a different way. We're able to bring that, kind of the value of that perspective and seeing it done in different organizations. So that provides that external viewpoint as well. Gain assurance on direction before making substantive decisions. So this is the EWM use case is a good example, right? They know they're going to make this investment, or they think they're going to make this big investment. Are they going down the right path? Are they being short-sighted? Is it even feasible, right? That type of assessment we can do in a quick amount of time, and then that gives you that validation and assurance for your leadership team before you go make those big multi-million-dollar investments. The wins come quickly. Knowledge transfer and education, building up your staff's understanding of this domain or this direction and roadmap is certainly very valuable. And then these are always actionable insights to inform your investments, right? So you'll have a list of things that you can do that will drive value, and then they're listed in a way that they're very actionable, and you can plan your investments and your strategies around them. So I'm getting close to the end. These are some of the recent engagements and offerings. I showed you some of the outputs of a DevOps advisory. We did one Agile assessment last year. We're currently just starting another one. We have done architecture advisories in SAP and BTP domain areas. Integration maturity assessment is one that we're just kicking off right now. And then we've done several of these Merlin S/4HANA UX transformation assessments. And so that entails looking at your transaction history through an SCO3N report, understanding where Fiori fits into a support position for the transactions that are most used by your organization and where you can go with that. There's a lot of deliverables that come out of that. So these are ones that we've done recently. We do have some very kind of more standard advisory offerings around the ones that I've listed here. As you can see, each of 4 of the 5 have to do with the user experience. And obviously that's where we leverage our design team and our understanding of the Fiori landscape and S4 and how that can transform your user experience in a number of different ways. And then we have a BTP advisory service there. So these are all very timely. S4HANA, BTP are big topics for most of our clients. They're either in planning or in iterative stages of delivery right now on some of those. And so these have all been very highly sought in the marketplace and very well received. That is the end of my presentation. I'm finished with 1 minute to spare. Are there comments, questions? And again, I would ask, feedback. What have you seen from any other types of engagements or advisories that might differ from this? Do you see value? Yeah, so a great observation. I'll go back to where I started. These are kind of the sequence of activities in our best practice end-to-end approach where we can add the most value to you. Design thinking's here once you've identified some very specific opportunities, and then how do we elaborate the solutioning for that and get very specific to prepare you to build and deliver that, right? These assessments, that is a predecessor. You're exactly right. So that falls into this category where we're discovering and strategizing and building your plan and how you move big topics forward organizationally. So these definitely fall into that left, more strategic lane. I was going to say quadrant, but there's 5. We need to make it 4. Good observation. Anything else? Okay. I'm around all day. I'm available any other time. My contact information is at the end of the slide, and I know you'll have access to all of these. Happy to talk about any of these with you. I would just leave you with, again, each of them are customized for your particular need, right? Even the ones that we have as standard offerings have some standard outputs and collateral already built, but will be customized in whatever statement of work agreements that we come up with to give you that value in that short time period specific to your use case. And so don't feel like it needs to be constrained. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.